Welcome back. Or if this is your first time joining in, welcome to Hypothesis Cafe. This is a meeting of the minds of the art, the science, and the business of life. I'm coming to you today with part 2 of a hypothesis that I had put out about a week ago called Consumers versus Producers. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. I'm going to recap, so if you haven't seen it, I'll catch you up. I came across this topic because I had noticed a pattern in the attitudes and approaches of some people, the choices that we make, why we opt out of certain options, we decide that's not for us, and we approach certain choices differently. And I noticed that there's a pattern there's a divergence in attitudes and approaches, and I call it consumers versus producers. Now, I've also been in the middle for about the last 5 or 6 years. I've been in the middle of reading this book, and I'm going to read it. The full title is long, but I'll give you the full title. It's called Remix: Making Art and Commerce Thrive in a Hybrid Economy. Let me say it again. It's called Remix: Making Art and Commerce Thrive in the Hybrid Economy. And it's by a gentleman named Lawrence Lessig. Okay. And he was also talking about that there are these two pretty abstract or meta demographics that we see around us. We have tons of demographics set up by race, sex, age, what have you. But there are these other, when you talk about cultural engagement, cultural involvement, cultural expression, when you get into discussions like that, you end up discussing these two different demographics, consumers and producers. Now, one thing that he did for me, which I appreciate, is he put those two demographics into very, very concrete terms, and I'm going to read what he wrote. He refers to consumers as a read-only culture. And he says, and I have it here, a read-only culture is a culture less practiced in performance. Okay? They're into amateur creativity and are more comfortable with simple consumption. These are the people who call themselves foodies because they love to go out to restaurants and try different foods. They consume, they shop, they go out to buy the clothes. It could be full sale, wholesale, clearance. They just love to go out and shop. They love to collect things, they love to shop, they love to consume. And rarely does it enter into their minds or hearts to enjoy clothing, food, books, and other amusements and hobbies from a hands-on productive way. They don't really want to be interactive with that particular hobby or errand or whatever it is. It's a one-way system for them. They just want to receive or read only what's out there. They're not interested in producing. They're not interested in working that. Okay, which brings me to the producer culture, which Lessig calls the read-write culture. Okay, so what he describes as read-write is ordinary citizens read their culture by listening to it or by reading representations. You watch TV, you view a film, you listen to music, you hear music or talk radio, you view, you see, you listen, but all of that is receiving culture. But read-only folks don't put culture out. They only read it. They only receive it. Whereas producers, they read, but that's only the beginning. Then they turn around and write culture for themselves. They take what they've learned. They take input. They read, and then they run it through their mental and creative computer, and then they put something out there. There's output. There's a productivity that comes from it. They're not just receiving. They receive, they jive with it for a minute, and then they produce something and put it back out there. So they're the read write culture, and their way of engaging in the world is a two-way street, whereas the read only is a one-way street. And I think that's the best way, if I can think how to put it in the best perspective, give you a visual of it, that's what it is. But let me finish what he says. Ordinary citizens read their culture by listening to it or by reading representations. However, reading is not enough. Instead, they add to the culture they read by creating and recreating the culture around them. Now, when I read that, I said, now that makes perfect sense between consumers and producers. Consumers read and receive culture, read, write, or producers, they read, but then they also repossess that culture and then externalize or express or produce something and put it out there for other people to read. So they allow other people to read their representations of how they see the world and their perspective, etc., etc. And it makes for an interesting exchange. Now, when you think about this world of ours and what keeps it turning, what keeps it moving around, yes, my hypothesis is that even though I'm a bona fide producer, I can't do the one-way system. I'm definitely a person who likes to write culture as much as I read it, absolutely. My hypothesis is that they are both as equally important to each other. No one is more important than the other. Now, Lessig's book is really talking about how copyright law, its structure, and its current function works against the read-write culture. So people who want to take in culture and then either rejig, reformat, adapt, or even to reference and quote it like we do in school. You write a paper, you make a point, you reference somebody, or you cite another author or whatever. Then once you start doing that with music or with visual arts or even performing arts, it is, how can I say, it's almost as, it's the same as copyright infringement. To quote, to use, to adapt, if you use anything that is that somebody else has wrote, it's copyright infringement. It's not like when you're in education and you're writing something and you cite another work saying, I refer to this other work to come to these conclusions and these thoughts and these theories, or I've done an annotated bibliography. When you do that in culture or in business outside of the world of education, then it could be considered plagiarism and it's copyright infringement. And so Lessig is saying, we need to rethink the way that we have formatted and the way that we enforce copyright laws and copyright infringement, because it is culturally suppressive, particularly to those who are of the read-write ilk, which I kind of see his point. I don't know how it would be formatted or restructured in order to be less culturally suppressive, but there you go, there it is. If you're interested in reading the book, or you want to Google it and find out more about the author or the work that he put out there, I'll say the title again. It's called Remix: Making Art and Commerce Thrive in the Hybrid Economy. And his name is Lawrence Lessig. It's a really good book. It touches on this topic that I've been talking about. Now, for me, my hypothesis is that these two demographics are equally important. No one is more important than the other. My question to you is, like I did in the last segment about consumers and producers, my question to you is, which one are you? I know I'm a producer. I'm definitely a producer. I can't just sit there and just read a book. I have to have a dialogue with the book. I have to write notes in the margins and write journal entries, and usually some thought, some inspiration gets to flowing, and then that thought spins off and it becomes a dance, a poem, a prayer, a song. It becomes something. I can't just let it sit there in my mind as a thought. I've got to recreate it and repurpose it and turn that thought into something creative, some type of creative expression. That I've always been that way, and I don't think I'll ever stop till the Lord say stop. My question to you is, which one are you? Do you see yourself as more of a read only? I just want to consume. It's only for my amusement and enjoyment. And I'm not interested in writing back. I'm not interested in hitting reply to what I just read and answering back or clapping back. I'm not interested in that. Some people are like that, and that's fine. Again, you're equally as important as somebody who has to take everything they learn and reproduce it into something else. I mean, both are equally as important. Both make the world go round. And to that end, I had put up a couple of pros and cons. Now, I couldn't remember them all, so I'm reading right now. Okay, if you think about producers, and these were just ideas that I had jotted down. I just want to shoot them out there at you. That when it comes to producers or the read-write culture, there are pros and cons to it. Pros, if you're a person who, for example, what I said about the consumers, foodie consumers are people who go out to eat. And they might try different restaurants and try different kinds of dishes. Different parts of the world have different kinds of food. So you might try Japanese one day, Greek the next day, Italian the next, and Indian the next. And you just try all these different things. You have an experience. You're trying. A producer type foodie or a read-write foodie is going to grow their own food possibly, or have their own herb garden. Like, they want to put work into the process. They're not just receiving the food, they're making the food. Okay, they want to go to cooking class, and they're big on cooking at home, and they're the ones who have the dinner parties. They don't just go to dinner parties. So you see there's a little bit of a difference there. When it comes to clothing, a lot of people, love to go shopping. Go to Macy's, go to JCPenney's. If there's any Sears left out there in the world, you go to Sears. Or you might just shop online. You buy and you collect and you have and you possess. But producer or read-write clothing, or I would say fashionistas and fashionistas and divas and divos, they're going to buy fabric, and a lot of times they're making their own. Or they're like me. You might buy a piece that needs some work, needs some love, needs some upgrades, and you repurpose it, or you renovate it, or refurbish it, or refashion it to be exactly what you want it to be. And you evolve your zhuzh by repurposing or refurbishing that particular piece. And you wear it however is personal for you, whatever you like. It's in your style. But you're recrafting and recreating something. So you're not just buying a coat. You're buying a piece of fabric and wrapping it into a dress or a head wrap or a skirt or shawl or something like that. That's what you do. So that's the difference. Now, you can still be a foodie and be a foodie consumer or be a foodie producer. And either way is cool. Now, I'll come back to this. For my read-write producer types, a pro is that because you're willing to do the work of producing something new or repurposing something old and renewing it or upcycling it, you're not at the mercy of trends. A lot of people today who are consumers, you consume what people put out. If people put out skinny jeans, a consumer's going to buy skinny jeans. If they're putting out biker shorts, if they're putting out Stacey Adams shoes, if they're putting out jumpers and corduroy pants, you're going to buy what's there. Because you're receiving, you're reading the culture. You're not read-writing. You're not taking that and refashioning it into something else. Not yourself, nor are you contracting a tailor or a seamstress to do your fixing for you. You're not redesigning it at all. You're taking it as it is. But producers will take something and refashion it to make it their own. So I think that's a pro of being a producer. You're not at the mercy of trends. You can take anything that's trendy but not authentic and make it authentic to you. So you're not walking around looking like everybody else, because you'll recreate something to make it more personal for you. Yeah. Another one. Being a producer, it requires and allows for you to be creative and cognitive. It really makes you think. You're constantly exercising your brain, your analytical, logical side, and your creative, abstract, imaginative side. So just, you have so much of your brain working, trying to design, to fashion, and figure out how you're going to make this work, applying methods, applying theories, and then working with the materials that you're using to get to that, desired goal. You put a lot into it, and it really does exercise the mind. Consumers don't get that kind of exercise in that way. So that's where it really is a pro to be a producer. And another one is anything that you make, anything that you do and you can produce, and I say this, anything that you can put your mind, heart, and hands to has meaning for you. Has meaning for you. You can think of the inspiration you got. You can think of the inspiration and motivation that pushed you to finish it. And then when you see the finished product, it means something. When you have a job well done or a great experience in producing something, it has meaning for you. And it allows you to reach new depths and new heights within yourself, because you're constantly engaging your own imagination, your own sense of logic, what looks good to you, what doesn't look good to you. And that part of it is meaningful. And it's in the production that you enjoy is meaningful. And I don't think consumers they cannot, being that they're consumers and not producers, they don't get meaning from doing, because they're not doing, not to the extent that producers are. You don't get that same satisfaction just from reading only and receiving. However, a con, I'm thinking on the producer side, is just like what I said before, producers and consumers are equally as important in the world, no doubt. A producer-only society would be sorely lacking, and the economy would probably collapse. Because if we all could produce our own and there were no consumers, we would have no economy. You need somebody who's going to buy. You need somebody who's going to consume. You need somebody to sell to or to read the culture. You need somebody to be that person who's going to read and perhaps not write back, just enjoy the consumption of whatever is put out there, whatever is written, whatever culture is written. We need to have consumers there, buying, reading the culture. You need that. That is a worthwhile demographic, because if they weren't there, the economy would collapse. I mean, the whole financial and I'd say cultural ecosystem would collapse. You need them both, right? So I'm going to end here in just a minute. I just want to talk a little bit about consumers. Now, even though I know I am a producer through and through, I know this about myself. I have not once badmouthed consumers. I don't know how they do it. My imagination will not let me sleep unless I'm creating and making something new. But that's just my world that I live in. Okay. But I would say that consumers also have their own pros as well. And I really had to take time to think about this, because at first I couldn't think of any. And I said, how can I put this segment out here and sound objective when I couldn't think of anything great for consumers? I think that, like I said about the economy and the financial and cultural ecosystem, that consumers establish balance. You need us both. You need somebody who's going to read the culture. And maybe that's all they do, is read the culture. They take it in. They enjoy it. It's for amusement. Not all of it has to be flipped and turned into work or creative expression. Sometimes it's just to sit back and enjoy and share in the experience. Enjoy the moment. You know, if you get inspiration, great, but sometimes you don't. You're just enjoying that moment and the fullness of what it is, and then you moving on to the next. I enjoyed this this Mediterranean meal. I've enjoyed going to Aladdin's and having my fattoush and my fresh fruit smoothie, and now I'm on to the next. I'm going to get ribs. You know, it's just whatever you feel like, and you're just enjoying one meal after the other. No muss, no fuss, no extra, no big production thing, just enjoying the moment. There's a leisureness to it. There's a joie de vivre to it that doesn't exist among producers. Because I find that as a producer, you're so pushed to write that sometimes you don't fully enjoy the reading of it for what it is, because you're so ready to create your own. So I think they bring to it a certain balance and a very, not simple, but very, and it's not simple, it's not plain, but just a very matter-of-factly, let's just enjoy it. It doesn't always have to be a prelude to a production. Sometimes you can just enjoy life, and that's it. End of statement. Let's see. I said the economy would tank. Consumers are a necessary part of society. I want to end with this, that we talk about producers and consumers. I've said that a lot in this segment, but I noticed there's also a third category. And I would say category 3A and 3B, okay? I call them academics and critics, and I listed it here. That the third category, which is academics and critics, they sort of blur the lines, because academics will read, but they're not producing their own culture. They're producing theory, thought, criticism. You know, they're creating a meta-narrative around the culture that's being read, but it's not necessarily producing their own culture necessarily. It may not go as far as that. You know, you're not taking a Toni Morrison book and turning it into a play, but you're writing an essay weighing some of the themes and some of the conduits and some of the effects and parameters, etc., and you're having a discussion about it. So that's not exactly read only, but it's not exactly read right, because you're not creating a whole new work of art. You're creating a work, but it's an academic work, and it's a form of criticism or discussion about it. It's not exactly a new culture 100%. So there is that middle ground. So I open it up again. Do you feel that you're not a consumer 100%? Not a producer 100%. Maybe you're a critic or an academic. You take it in and you think about it and you weigh it, or all of the things that's being said about whatever that cultural aspect is, but you're not producing anything new of yourself per se to add to the culture that you've just read from. Maybe not. It's possible that you have tons of critics and educators and those who aren't on the periphery of this dynamic, but they're very much in it. They're involved in it, and they're also equally as important as consumers and producers. Let's see. Let me keep going with this statement. Blurred lines with academics who don't necessarily produce new work in the read-write realm, but produce new theories and practices around the works that they view. It can be documentaries or visual essays, etc., etc. So that's another line. And you could be any one of them, or you could have been all three at different points of your life. You know, in your 20s, you might be more academic. You know, you get older, maybe 30s, 40s, 50s, and you very much focus on working and making money, and so now you have more disposable income. Maybe you want to be a consumer at that point in your life. Then maybe you edge on into retirement, maybe 50s, 60s, or 70s, and now you find that you have all this creative energy since you're not working. Now you want to produce. Now you want to have a garden. Now you want to get into fashion design. You can do it at all different points of your life. It's not just you wrap your identity around one and you stay there. It can change and shift as you change and shift, as you grow. You'll grow into one or out of one and into another. I'm going to end it there. My hypothesis is that yes, these not one, not two, but these three demographics exist in our society. Yes, they absolutely do. And no one is more important, more exciting, more favorable, or more fun than the other. I'm going to end it here. You have a blessed evening. If you have any comments, questions, or responses, you can send a response video and reply to me, or you can write something in the messages down below. I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for taking the time to watch and witness Hypothesis Cafe. Now, this is also a challenge. Don't just read me, write back. All right? Have a blessed one. Bye-bye.